Okay, let's make this quick and forgive my messy desk. So the October Apple event has just wrapped up, so let's talk about some things that you should care about and some things that you probably don't really need to worry about too much just yet. Obviously, I have my own opinions on some of this stuff, so I'll try to package what was announced and take it from there. Okay, so the very first thing that came up is the HomePod Mini. Now, this is surprising not only because they finally integrated with some other services, except Spotify. I don't know what the hell's going on there. I'll get to that in a second. But it's priced at $99, which if you're familiar with Apple at all, you know that they typically tend to price on the higher end of things, regardless of how you feel on the quality or return on investment for that price. However, $99 is pretty solid. The standard HomePod has exceptional sound quality, except it's priced a little bit too high for the vast majority of households, but this Mini seems to make a little bit more sense price-wise. Obviously, we'll have to wait until we get our hands on it before we can make a determination as to whether or not it's worth that price or not. But my initial reaction is you can still skip this one. At the end of the day, the biggest drawback is Siri. Now, they did do some things, and Apple's pushing some interconnectivity and being able to identify different voices in the household and things like that, but Siri simply doesn't have the track record to prove that it's on par with something like Alexa or Google Home. Still, the fact that they're now allowing integration with iHeartRadio and Pandora, Amazon Music, other services that you may pay for already, is a little bit of a leg up, and I think makes this a little bit of an easier pill to swallow if you decide to go for it. Now, on the other hand, this is where it gets a little weird. With all those new third-party integrations with Siri and being able to control your music through Siri, Spotify is still absent. I don't know what's going on between Apple and Spotify, but both of them really need to get over themselves. Apple especially. Spotify by far is one of the bigger, if not the biggest streaming platform out in the world right now. It just makes no sense for Apple to continue to shut them out, or if Spotify is being difficult about it, maybe they need to loosen up a little bit as well. However, knowing Apple's track record with knowing how they handle app stores and developers and the things that they demand for being on the App Store, I wouldn't be surprised if this is mostly on Apple and Apple making the decision here. Obviously, as a Spotify user myself, this is extremely frustrating and further cements my decision to not really invest into a HomePod or a HomePod Mini. Still, once we get our hands on it and we see some reviews on the audio quality, we'll be able to make a determination as to whether or not it's worth it as a smarter wireless speaker, considering that I don't really think Siri is that smart. Now for the big news. Obviously, it's an October Apple event, so that means we gotta talk about the new iPhones. I'm gonna be honest, I think this is a pretty standard run-of-the-mill yearly update to iPhone. A lot of the changes you really won't notice all that much unless you're a super enthusiast about technology and gadgets, but even then, it's still relatively marginal over the current generation of iPhone. However, I personally do enjoy the new form factor. I think it makes a lot of sense, and having the option for a smaller device, which it seems like we're going back to moving to smaller phones, is a good move by Apple to make them a little bit more accessible via price and not have to worry about carrying this giant phone in your pocket. That said, the form factor is kind of back to the iPhone 4/iPhone 5 era, where it's a little bit more hard edges and you have the band around to kind of push for 5G, which we'll talk about in a second. As for the iPhone Pro, honestly, the iPhone 12 Pro is a nice upgrade over the iPhone 11, but as a little bit more of an enthusiast myself, it was a little disappointing not to have 120 Hz refresh rate on the display this year. Now, I get Apple's reasoning for most consumers not being able to tell the difference between a 60 and 100 Hz display, but for a Pro labeled device, you would think that you'd get a little bit more than just an improved camera. Now, that's not to say that the improvements of the camera aren't good, but again, if you're not regularly taking photos or video, then it really is a little bit negligible and you're probably okay keeping the phone that you already have. Now, on the flip side, I do think that bringing back MagSafe is a pretty cool move by Apple. Hopefully this saves you a little bit of annoyance when you're trying to wirelessly charge your phone, and now you'll have something magnetic, which opens up a bunch of possibilities for different accessories and things like that that can just stick to the back of your phone and you're good to go. I don't think that's a system seller on its own, but it's a nice feature that makes you feel like it's worth the upgrade, even though it probably isn't by itself. Another important thing to note is that Apple will no longer ship power adapters with iPhone packages. I think the reasoning for lowering their carbon footprint is a valid and real one, and one that I personally appreciate a little bit. But it's certainly something to keep in mind, especially if this is going to be your very first iPhone, or if you don't have any old existing ones lying around. I don't think that there was a single feature or single announcements of the new iPhone, or the HomePod for that matter, that really will make a huge difference in the lives of the everyday standard iPhone user. Okay, so I'll try to keep this as simple as possible, but 5G is going to be the single biggest thing that most users will notice on the new iPhone. And that's not so much that it's an iPhone unique or an iPhone specific feature itself. It's more so that now iPhone will be able to take advantage of a 5G network that most of the major carriers have now been able to deliver for the past year or so. Now, I do think it's important to note that in order to enable 5G on your iPhone, you're going to have to go through your carrier, which likely means that you'll have to pay more for your monthly phone bill. So that's something to keep in mind, and why I say that there isn't a iPhone specific feature in the iPhone 12 that requires an upgrade. Yes, there have been other 5G capable devices, but it's difficult to dispute the impact that Apple has delivering a feature that will most likely change and impact the way that most people use their mobile devices. Apple did bring on the Verizon CEO to talk about 5G specifically, more importantly talking about the download speeds of up to 4 gigabits or even higher down the line, and 200 megabits upload. This is extremely significant, not only because it's a vast improvement over 4G, but a lot of household internet speeds don't even sniff that type of performance. Granted, this is all very theoretical, so once you see it in real world and there's higher congestion on those wavelengths, you will see that performance drop significantly, as we did when we transitioned from 3G to 4G. Still, it's something to bear in mind, especially if you're a heavy data user. Try to keep in mind any data caps on your plan, because this will certainly hit right up into that very quickly if you suddenly decide to download your Call of Duty update to your PS4 using your phone's network. Those are really the two biggest consumers that I've personally seen from the average person take up most of their data. That's video consumption and downloads, as well as game updates. We can definitely do more content or another video on 5G if you guys are really interested in that. But outside of just having the satisfaction of having that new iPhone, there really isn't that much of a reason to upgrade. Now, I do think that the Dolby Vision and some of the 10-bit HDR implementation is going to help move things forward for video consumption in general, but again, similar to the 120 hertz reasoning, it's not something that the average person is really going to be able to tell the difference on. So again, something to keep in mind. Now, if you are someone who doesn't have a TV or really just consumes all their media on their phone, it might make a little bit more sense, especially if you're coming from an iPhone that's more than a few years old. Then it starts to become a lot more worth it. I'm probably going to upgrade, so maybe I'm a little bit contradictory, but that's because I'm doing this and trying to keep up to date with the technology, and I kind of just enjoy it. I can do it, so that's why I'm doing it. Still, that doesn't mean that I can't be pissed off at Apple for still not allowing the Spotify integration to Siri. God damn it, just make it happen. Oh, and one other thing, I feel like this got really glossed over in the whole hoopla of the new iPhones and the HomePod, but League of Legends coming to consoles and mobile is a very big deal. Despite that game being more than 10 years old now, it's still one of the, if not the biggest PC game in the world. So that kind of just tossed in the middle of the iPhone event, I thought was pretty interesting, because it's a pretty big announcement that just was casually dropped on everyone. So if you're a gamer, or if you've played League of Legends at all, this is a pretty big deal and will only increase the audience. We can talk about that a little bit more in depth at a different time, but I definitely found that to be pretty interesting and entertaining as a former League player myself. So to wrap up, the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro will start pre-orders on October 16th, so that's this coming Friday, and will be available for purchase or delivery on October 23rd, so next Friday. So we're about a week and a half away from new iPhones potentially being in our hands. Keep an eye out for that if you want to go ahead and pre-order. Make sure you get that in time for Friday. And the 12 mini will be available on November 6th for pre-order, and then November 13th for that launch. So keep that in mind. There are two different launch windows depending on the iPhone model that you're going to get, so make sure you do your research and check it out. So that's all we have for this video on the Apple event. We'll be talking a little bit more in depth with the events and some other things that have occurred and leading up into the console launches on the podcast. So make sure you go check that out. Links, as always, will be in the description. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well to stay up to date to everything we're doing. We may have more content coming out. The podcast is back in full swing. So thanks again for watching. Catch you next time.